Under Article 1217, kapag ang isa sa mga solidary debtor ay nagbayad ng obligation, ibig sabihin daw nun may extinguish or matapos na yung whole obligation. Kung nag-offer naman ang solidary debtor na magbayad, kunwari tatlong solidary debtor, tapos lahat sila nag-offer na magbabayad, si creditor obra siyang mamili kung sino or kung kaninong offer yung i-accept niya. Si solidary debtor na nagbayad, pwede siyang humingi ng reimbursement sa co-debtor niya. Pero only the share lang, hindi siya pwedeng mag-ask ng sobra-sobrang reimbursement sa co-debtor niya. Kung ang debtor ay nagbayad before ang due date, hindi siya pwedeng humingi ng interest from his co-debtor. In any case, ang isa sa mga solidary debtor ay naging insolvent, meaning na wala na siya ng ability na magbayad pa ng utang. Ang mangyayari ngayon, sasaluhin ng kanyang mga co-debtor yung share niya sa utang pero in proportion. Example, A, B, and C are solidary debtor to D for the amount of 12,000. Si letter D siya yung creditor. Number 1, what will happen if A paid the obligation? Si A, binayaran na lahat ng obligation, so the whole obligation will be extinguished. Number 2, what will happen to B and C? Si A ay nagbayad ng obligation. Ano naman ang mangyayari kay B and C? Dahil solidary obligation sila, damay-damay na mawawalan din yung obligation ni B and C kay D. Hindi na nila kailangan pa magbayad kay D. A can ask for reimbursement both from B and C kasi nga, kahit na solidary obligation sila, sa mata ni creditor at debtor, may kanya-kanya silang share at utang. Since 12K ang utang, tapos tatlo sila, tig 4K sila, kaya pag nag-ask ng reimbursement si 8,000 lang yung pwede niyang hingin sa dalawa. Number 3, what if A, B, and C offered pay D? The solidary creditor can choose which offer to accept. Number 4, what if B is insolvent? Kung si B wala na siyang ability na magbayad pero dahil solidary debtor si A at C, sila ang sasalo ng utang ni B. Ang tanong, magkano ng babayaran? Ang utang ni B ay 4K, so 2K na lang yung dalawa. Under Article 1218, sinasabi na kapag yung payment ginawa ng solidary debtor ay after ng obligation as prescribed, wala siyang right mag-ask pa ng reimbursement from his co-debtor. Under Article 1219, ang creditor ang gusto lang i-remit na obligation is yung isa lang ang meaning. Yung isa lang na solidary debtor, liable pa din siya sa kanya na magbayad ng utang. Pero sinasabi din dito na kapag mas nauna na yung pagbabayad ng solidary debtor, kunwari may dalawa siyang solidary debtor, tapos nauna magbayad ng utang yung isang solidary debtor. Tapos, tsaka lang sinabi ni creditor na i-remit niya itong share ng isang solidary debtor. Ibig sabihin, pwede pa rin i-ask ng reimbursement itong solidary debtor na nagbayad ng obligation niya. Kahit na-remit na ang share niya kasi nga nauna ng payment kaysa dun sa remission. So, wala siyang effect. Example, A and B are liable in solidum to C in the amount of 1,000. C remitted A shares. A and B are solidary debtors, so liable in solidary to C, which is siya yung solidary creditor. Then, the amount is 1,000. Ngayon, si C ay niremit niya yung share ni A. So, sabi niya kay A, wag ka nang magbayad. Number 1, how much will be paid to C? So, niremit na ni C yung bayad ni A. Siyempre, ang babayaran na lang ni B ay yung share niya, which is 500 dahil hati sila ni A dun sa 1K. Number 2, what will happen if payment by B was made before the remission? Nagbayad muna si B sa whole obligation niya. Kaya kay C, kaya binayaran niya yung 1K kay C bago i-remit ni C yung share ni A. Ang mangyayari, A will still be liable to B. Kasi mas nauna yung payment kaysa remission, pero ubra pa din magsabi si B ng reimbursement kay B. Reimbursement si A kay B.
20. The remission of the whole obligation obtained by one solidary debtors does not entitle him to reimbursement from his co-debtors. No right to reimbursement in case of remission. Debtor who obtains remission pays nothing to the creditor. Remission is essentially gratuitous, is really a donation. Article 1221. If the thing has been lost, or if the presentation has become impossible without the fault debtors of Solidary, the obligation shall be extinguished. Rules in case things has been lost or presentation has become impossible. Number 1. Loss is without fault and after delay. For example, A, B, and C promise Solidary to deliver to D a particular tract valued at 15,000. The obligation shall be extinguished in the tracts is lost or destroyed through a fortuitous event without a fault of A, B, and C, and before they have incurred in delay. For number 2, loss is due to fault on the part of a solidary debtor. Example, in the preceding example, the tract was lost through the fault of C, A, and B shall be also responsible to D for the price of the tracts as well damages through A and B were not fault at all. Solidary obligation is in essence of mutual agency. As far as the creditor is concerned, the fault or delay of one solidary debtor shall be the fault or delay of all solidary debtors. So, A and B, however, can recover from C. The guilty or negligent debtor the full amount of such price of damage if A and B have already contributed to the price of tracts. If D recovers the price or damage from C, the latter cannot claim reimbursement from A and B because he alone was a default. Number 3. Loss is without fault but after delay. For example, if the tract was lost through a fortuitous event but after a demand was made upon C and D, can still recover damages from A or B or both of them without prejudice to the right of action latter against C following the same rule on number 2. So, the default by C makes all the solidary debtors responsible even for the fortuitous. Article 1222. A solidary debtor may, in action filed by a creditor, avail himself of all defenses which are derived from the nature of the obligation and of those which are personal to him, or pertain to his own share. With respect to those which personally belong to the others, he may avail himself thereof only as regards the part of debt over which latter are responsible. So, defense available to solidary debtor. So, for number 1, defenses derived from the nature of the obligation. For example, A and B are solidarily liable to C in the amount of 4,000. The entire debt of A and B was paid by D. In action by C against A, the latter can raise the defense of payment by virtue of which the obligation was extinguished. So, a defense derived from the nature of obligation is a complete defense because it nullifies the obligation or render it effective. Other examples are fraud, prescription, remission, legally or absence of consideration, res judicata, non-performance of a suspensive condition. So for number 2, defenses personal to or which pertain to share the debtor's sue. For example, if the action by C is against B and B was insane at the time obligation was contracted, B can put up the defense of insanity with respect of entire obligation. Defense is personal to B alone, so it is complete defense. So for number 3, defense is personal to others, solidary debtor. So for example, in the two preceding examples, the defense insanity or non-fulfillment of the suspensive condition is not available to A, as to release him from his liability for his share in the obligation. So in other words, A may avail himself thereof only as regards that part of the debt for which B is liable. Having only a partial defense, A is still liable for 2,000, his share in the obligation.
Indivisible obligation. An indivisible obligation is one the object of which in its delivery or performance is not capable of partial fulfillment. Ito daw po ay isang bagay na kung saan sa paghahatid o pagtupad ng kanilang pinag-usapan ay hindi nila kayang isakatuparan ang kanilang obligasyon. For example po, obligado ni Kat ang kanyang sarili na maghatid kay Kate ng isang particular na kotse noong October 12. Ang obligasyong ito ay hindi mahahatid dahil hindi ito kaya ng bahagyang pagganap. So dapat po ang kotse ay mahihatid sa isang pagkakataon at sa kabuuan. Article 1224. A joint indivisible obligation gives rise to indemnity for damages from the time any one of the debtors does not comply with his undertaking. The debtors who may have been ready to fulfill their promises shall not contribute to the indemnity beyond the corresponding portion of the price of the things or of the value of the service in which the obligation consists. Ito daw po ay nagbibigay ng indemnity para sa mga pinsala mula sa oras na sinuman ng mga debtors ay hindi sumunod sa kanyang gawain o mga obligado nila. At mga may utang naman po ay maaaring handa na upang matupad ang kanilang mga pangako. For example po, may utang sina Jake at JR kay May bago ang araw na pinag-usapan nila. 3 araw pagkatapos, humiling si May ngunit hindi pa handa si JR dahil sa kanyang pagkakakulong. Si Jake ay dapat magbigay ng kanilang bahagi sa halaga ng car at ibigay kay May. Si JR naman po ay hindi makasot at babayaran sa bandang huli ang kanyang obligasyon kay May. O si May ay maaaring magdemanda kay JR kasama ang interest at mga nagawa niyang pinsala. Another article, Article 1225. For the purposes of the preceding articles, obligation to give definite things and those which are not susceptible of partial performance shall be deemed to be indivisible. Same lang po siya ng Article 1224, ang obligation ay narapat magbigay ng natatanging mga tiyak na bagay. Obligation deemed indivisible. Obligation to give definite things and those which are not susceptible of partial performance. For example, parang gano'n na nga po ang indivisible obligation na dapat mayatid ang kanyang obligation sa isang pagkakataon at sa kabuuan. Divisibility or indivisibility in obligation not to do. In negative obligation not to do, the character of the prestation in its particular case shall determine their divisibility or indivisibility. Example po sa indivisibility obligation, si Brian po ay obligado kay Ann na huwag magbenta ng sigarilyo na kanyang tindahan sa loob ng 1 taon. Dito ang obligasyon ay dapat matupad ng tuloy-tuloy sa isang tiyak na panahon. Divisibility naman po, obligation naman po ay kung ang obligasyon ni Ann ay hindi magbenta ng sigarilyo sa kanyang mga tindahan sa linggo at holidays lamang. Ang obligasyon ay mahahati dahil ang pagtitiis ay hindi tuloy-tuloy.
Divisible obligation. An obligation is divisible when the object of the performance is susceptible of division. Another meaning, divisible obligation are those where the object or prestation is capable of partial performance, meaning it can be performed in parts. Ang divisible obligation daw ay ang paghahati o ang partihan. Now, the division may be qualitative as to the kind of things, where an example could be A and B to deliver a car and a motorcycle. Here are the example. Si A ang magdi-deliver ng kotse and si B naman ang magdi-deliver ng motorcycle. And divisible obligation, it can also be quantitative, as when A and B obligate themselves to deliver a 50 kilos of mangoes. Si A ang magdi-deliver ng 25 kilos at si B naman ang magdi-deliver ng another 25 kilos. And division, it can be also ideal and only in the mind of two parties, as in the case of partition of a parcel of land among co-owners. So, yung partihan daw ng lupa between ng owner and the co-owner will only exist in the mind. Kasi, hindi nila pwedeng hatiin yung lupa, strictly speaking, and literally. So, yung partihan or yung hatian nila sa lupa ay nag-exist lamang sa mga mind nila kung saan yung meets and boundaries ng bawat isa. And another, the law also give us instances when the obligation will be treated as divisible. First, when the obligation is the execution of a certain number of days of work, such as to pay a house in 10 days. So, yung pagbabayad mo daw po ng bahay, pwede mo siyang hindi bayaran ng buo sa loob lamang ng isang araw. Yung pagbabayad mo ng bahay, ay pwede mo siyang hati-hatiin within 10 days. And also, the accomplishment of work by measuring unit, katulad nga po ng example ko kanina, sa pag-deliver ng mangga, you can divide the 50 kilos to the two debtor. So, they deliver the 25 kilos each. Another case, as the case of the debtor is bound to sing 3 songs. Song number 1, song number 2, and song number 3. And those songs are separate and the obligation to sing 3 songs may be divided in terms of performance.